How to use Redbud Resource Group's Land Back Spider Graph resource tool. Before we can use this resource tool, we need to first answer this question. What is land back? What do we mean by land back? The term land back is referring to a movement that calls for the return of indigenous lands to indigenous peoples. It seeks to address historical and ongoing injustices related to colonialism, land dispossession, and the violation of indigenous sovereignty and rights. Land Back advocates for the restoration of land rights and the empowerment of indigenous communities to steward their own ancestral territories. Or, as this quote by Penny Els Rose from Let's Get the Land Back, a toolkit to restore our relations, says, Land Back is a movement to not only reclaim land, but also language, ceremony, medicine, and our relationship with one another. Land back is a form of repair and is another way to strengthen tribal sovereignty. It's important to understand from a native lens that land back can look like many different things. We often think of land back as only ownership or owning land, but land back actually includes a variety of pathways or steps to address the impacts of colonization. Land back isn't solely advantageous for indigenous communities. It supports tribal sovereignty, which then in turn enhances ecosystems, provides solutions for climate change, and even elevates public health and well being for the better. We all benefit from land back. Now that we have an understanding of what land back means, let's learn how to use the land back spider graph. Redbud Resource Group created this resource tool in the form of a spider graph to help evaluate or assess the scope of land return initiatives through the lens of the following 5 categories: ownership, leadership, stewardship, access, and consultation. Let's review these categories more closely and their definitions. Beginning with consultation. Consultation is a process of seeking advice, guidance, or expert opinions from individuals or professionals to make informed decisions or address specific issues. For example, consultation with tribal elders, cultural experts, and community members to determine the best approaches for reclaiming and managing ancestral lands. Access refers to the ability to enter, use, retrieve, or interact with something such as information, resources, or physical spaces. For example, government agencies or private landowners securing rights of way, creating trails or pathways for access, and providing informational resources to help Indigenous communities navigate their land rights. Stewardship refers to the responsible and ethical management, protection, and preservation of resources, assets, or interests for the benefit of current and future generations. For example, implementing conservation practices, restoring ecosystems, or developing land use plans that prioritize TEK, or traditional ecological knowledge. Leadership involves guiding and influencing individuals or groups towards a common goal, often through inspiration, vision, and the effective coordination of efforts. For example, establishing a Native Advisory Council. And finally, ownership, the legal and moral right to possess, control, and derive benefits from a specific property or asset. For example, legally transferring title or control of ancestral lands back to indigenous tribes or communities. Now, how do we use the spider graph? As we assess the scope of land return, the spider graph includes an assessment scale to rate each category, ranging from 0 to 25, 0 being non existent to 25 being excellent. Recognize that this assessment is subjective and influenced by factors like your starting point and tribal capacity. To deepen your understanding, we strongly recommend using Redbud's Allyship and Sovereignty Spectrum resources, tools that help you see where you stand in your engagement with tribal communities. Let's review a case study or scenario together to practice using the land back spider graph. Here is the case study. A state park has granted the local tribe access to park lands to host its annual Tule Boat Festival. The tribe is able to harvest tule on the park's lake throughout the year and may host a tule boat making workshop for tribal youth. There is a tribal member on the state park staff working in the educational programming department. Let's evaluate this case study by using the assessment scale for each of the five areas, starting with access. How would you rate access in this scenario from 0 to 25? Next, consultation, stewardship, leadership, ownership. From this case study, here is how we rated each of these categories on the spider graph. An important question to ask yourself when evaluating each category is, do you have enough information to make an informed decision or assessment? If you find that your answer is no, then pay attention to the questions that come up for you. Also, examine the reasoning behind your rating. Why is consultation a 5 on the scale and not a 25, for example? Your questions may uncover possibilities for improvement or may initiate important conversations with partners when evaluating the land back initiative or process. With the land back spider graph, we have included assessment questions and reflection prompts to help you in your evaluation process. Please make sure to download a PDF copy of the land back spider graph and add it to your Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements toolkit. You can find the land back spider graph on Redbud Resource Group's website at www.redbudresourcegroup.org.